Good morning, everybody. I'm your host, Keenan. Welcome to the December 16th, 2021 weekly DXdao community call. Today we'll be discussing the DXD buyback and Agave partnership via Carrot. We also have some special guests from Punks and a quick Swapper holiday recap. So let's hop right into it, starting with recaps. Chris, if you're around to chat governance.
Yes. So I think we did give an update last week on the governance stuff, so I'll keep it short. We are working on a compensation update that Melanie, a contributor to UX team, has been working through, and I think that's been the last couple weeks looking at that and hoping to go through proposal today, I believe. And then, I don't know if this is when we wanted to do the buyback stuff, or is that a separate section?
We do have a dedicated buyback section.
Okay.
To focus on.
Elsewhere, we are still, governance, as you say, governance never sleeps here. So we have been kind of working on a lot of different things like amending the governance gas refund parameters, kind of increasing that in light of some of the gas increases on mainnet. There's also been a lot of work on DX vote, and I won't get into if we're going to that. So a lot of different things doing there. I'm trying to think if there's any big signal proposal that we had. I guess we had the staking ETH go through. So I don't know if Dave wants to talk about that, but we had the signal proposal for 1,000 staking ETH, and then we actually acquired the first 500 ETH of that, and that's now in the treasury now.
Yeah, not too much to add to that, pretty much, but I think it's quite exciting. It's like one of the first yielding assets DXdao has, and we still retain the exposure to Ether, so that's pretty sweet. And we actually have another 500 Ether, which before end of the year will also turn into staked ETH, although across different platforms. So the first 500 were with Lido, and then we will also be getting some Stakewise, and I always forget the last one, which is my favorite one, which is Rocket Pool, I believe the correct name, which is really cool. Actually, it takes a much more decentralized approach to the staking, so to speak. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. And just to confirm, Dave, I'll give you the Treasury kind of recap floor now, but I'm assuming you did just run through a majority of it.
Yeah, so I guess the main part is the staking ETH. Also very exciting, which I believe we already mentioned on last week's call, is that on DXdao, due to the generic multi-call, we're able to actually interact more directly with protocols now, something we're not able to do on mainnet yet, as we rely on like the legacy Alchemy infrastructure, I would say. But on DXdao, we already have a generic multi-call, so we're able already to unwrap DAI directly through the Treasury. So, while it might seem a small thing in itself, it really shows like what these new schemes and what DXvote is building to allow DXdao directly to take a lot more actions trustlessly. So on mainnet, of course, we still rely on the multi-signature for a lot of things we can't do directly. And so that's really exciting that we're now able to actually take actions directly from the Treasury, as it removes the whole, I guess multi-sigs are somewhat centralized, and the whole process as well, and just being able to do that directly from the Treasury is quite exciting.
Thanks, Dave. And I have one question here left with me, and it's how much ETH is the Treasury making a year with the current staked ETH? And it might be worth, I'm not sure if you have this handy, but it might be worth accounting for the unconverted ETH as well that we plan on using for staking.
Yeah, so I mean, it obviously, it's a good question. Right now, it's around 100K. We only have 500 Ether stake, so at the current APY rate, which is of course also variable, right? So it's difficult to give an exact figure, as it highly depends on the APY of the given platforms. With the 500 Ether we currently have, assuming we retain the current APY rate throughout the next 365 days, that would be right around $100,000 worth of Ether we would be getting. And I mean, I guess that would be like 20 ETH off the top of my head, if the calculation is correct.
Yeah, and of course that refers to ETH being stable and or higher price as well. Maybe how much exactly additional ETH are we planning on staking? It might be worth just calling attention to that.
That's a good question. I think that's, of course, something we'll have to vote on chain, but definitely a larger amount than we are now. I think this first run was kind of to test the waters, see how we can acquire the different staked ETH options. As well, Rocket Pool, for example, which was one of them, had just launched actually on mainnet as we passed the proposal. So that's why we kind of like allocated a smaller amount. But just from my perspective, I would say it makes a lot more sense to hold a staked ETH asset rather than just holding Ether in a treasury alone, right? So I think based on that, we'll move forward. And I don't think it will necessarily be like in the next proposal, we'll move 90% of our Ether into staked ETH. I think it could also just be a much more gradual step, right? Where we can decide on a certain amount and then move forward in specific tranches of ETH.
Excellent, thank you. And one last question here in the chat by Mo saying, what's the project you're talking about? I'm assuming referring to the staking of the ETH. Maybe just want to give a quick recap of the 3 staking platforms we'll be using.
Sure. So we passed a proposal on chain, I believe roughly 10 to 14 days ago was when it was submitted. And it passed last week, I believe. So we actually just moving some of our ETH assets into staked ETH. So staked ETH is currently used to secure the beacon chain. And it also provides a financial incentive for securing the beacon chain through a given APY, right? Which is more or less all staking platforms have the same, which I believe is between 4 and 5% currently. And so the idea is we have a ton of Ether sitting in the treasury, which is really just sitting there. And of course, the great thing about staked ETH is that we retain the exposure to ETH. So I believe we are very confident in ETH in the long term as an asset class. And so we retain that exposure to ETH while also getting that APY. And yeah, so the platforms are currently Lido, Stakewise, and Rocket Pool. And so DXdao is not running any hardware for the Rocket Pool. We're just providing the ETH, which is then used by one of the node providers, right? I believe they put up half of the ETH, and then they get the other half, so 16 each. That's combined, and then we get the APY is what we get, and then there's a small cut that goes actually to the person who operates the node. Just answering to the question in the mothership text channel.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dave. Just see a couple people typing. Going to see if there's any final questions here before we move on to DXGov. Just a confirmation from Quintilon about DXdao running no hardware.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I don't think there's any way to do that in a decentralized way currently, so that's one of the main reasons we're not doing it directly.
So thank you very much, Dave. If there's any other questions, we can come back to them after the DXGov, but we'll move on now to DXGov, just looking for a general recap of what's going on the side of decentralized governance.
Yeah, so we've been just continuing with the usual, really, some updates to DXVote and just continued use of it for our own governance. Over the past couple of weeks, we've had some issues just cropping up, and generally just because we've been building things out more and having more use of DXVote. And so that's kind of helped us improve some processes and highlight some things we were not doing properly, or not necessarily not doing properly, but just things we'd overlooked in development and QA testing. So we're currently fixing a few things, and over the holidays there's quite a few bugs that we're sorting out just to make the platform more stable. And in terms of new developments, a lot of it's kind of going on mostly behind the scenes relating to guilds. And so hopefully in the new year we'll have some exciting things to be demoing and showing off. Quite a lot of progress being made there, and it's looking pretty awesome. So a lot to look forward to.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I do actually have one question. Might be a bit of a broken record since the last time you were up here. But it is there a timeline to fully depreciate Alchemy for governance?
Yeah, so I'll try not to get too technical here, but the current schemes that we rely on in the current DAO stack architecture is kind of, I guess, like once we have that fully deprecated, we should be confident in deprecating Alchemy. The recent issues we've had have kind of highlighted that we're not quite in a stable enough state yet. For that, because ultimately, when we have issues in DXvolt, we go back to Alchemy, and it's actually a nice tool to have when we're still in development. So, do we have a deadline or a timeline for it? No, but I would hope within the next, at least the start of next year, we would look to actually deprecate it. But obviously, we'll be taking it steady since it's not something we'll do lightly. And it's always a nice tool to have as like a backup.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ross. Let's move on here and chat the market chatter update, as we're now calling it, which is going to touch on, of course, the buyback, but also gives us room to fit in other things. I'm not sure we have anything else to fit in, but looking to Chris here for a bit of a buyback update.
Yeah, and I think just pasting the link to the Discord chat. I think this was yesterday, or the day before, Tuesday evening. So a couple different things here. So first, the fourth extension passed over the weekend there. So this extends it to $5 million total. And just to recap, this is slightly different than previous ones because the proposal itself actually included the ETH. And that ETH was deposited into the Gnosis protocol relayer on XDAI in one deposit. So instead of calculating the dollar amount for each trade, we kind of calculated it at the beginning with the ETH that's deposited there, and there'll need to be another extension when that ETH is out. Yeah, and so we started with that. We did run into some issues with some proposals earlier in the week. Ross kind of touched on them a little bit there. We had submitted we've kind of been automating this a lot. So Dave has a process for doing it and submitted a proposal the same way he had done before, but then actually the proposal was calling a different contract that was intended. So that delayed us a little bit, but I think the fix actually went in last night and maybe is already fixed there. But I think there's 3 buyback proposals that are live. We did see a little bit of a decrease in the average daily on-chain volume for DXD over the last couple of weeks. So right now, the 3-month average is $119,000 a day, and that was a decrease from a couple weeks ago, which was 133,000. But actually, most of the decrease just came because we're no longer counting some previous high volume days. From at least September, there was a big day there, so that's why it decreased a little bit there. You can see kind of the rest of the data there. There was maybe some interesting conversation actually just before this call. Pink Hog was in there asking some of the questions about counting the big trades. We don't have a really great way for doing this because they're for 1 inch, the 1 inch limit orders go through the same contracts as all the other orders, and so you mostly are like double counting all of the other exchanges if you look at that. So I've just been looking at that manually, and a lot of people in the community will just be posting different like OTC orders that go through. So I'm not sure if that's probably the best way to do that. Perhaps we need to be thinking going forward about a little bit more systematic way of calculating the volume here, because we have been kind of doing that more manually, but maybe that's the next thing we can work on just now that we've kind of gotten this new extension and a new process for that. The last thing I'd just say, kind of maybe for open conversation, is I was thinking about 2 different things as it relates to DXD liquidity, particularly on mainnet. And that's one, thinking about how governance, DXDAO governance, and in a way swapper governance can maybe adjust the swapper rewards to make sure there's liquidity on the pools that are needed. So right now, the biggest pool by far is on Arbitrum. It's about like $2 million there, and the mainnet pool is not as big. So thinking about what we could do maybe when the next mainnet pools launch or when Arbitrum pools launch to should we be directing more rewards to the mainnet pool? And then second, thinking about using one of Swapper's unique functions, which is to adjust the swap fee. So one of the concerns I think for a lot of LPs obviously is impermanent loss and having kind of losing that out. And I think DXD is not a super highly traded, doesn't have a super high trade volume, so it's hard to kind of get those fees from that way. But I was wondering if there would be an interest in maybe raising that swap fee, which higher. I think the balancer pool is 0.6%, but maybe that's something that could be appealing to get some additional DXD liquidity on mainnet. So yeah, that's kind of it there. I don't know if there are any questions about buyback stuff in general or the two prompts, two kind of questions on swapper or rewards for the DXD pool on mainnet, and then maybe adjusting the swap fee.
I might have missed it, but question is, what's the current swap fee for DXD on mainnet?
0.25%.
2.5. Okay.
Yeah.
And the 0.25 is the default swap fee for a pool. Every time a pool is created, that's where it starts.
Interesting. I think I would be personally in favor of adjusting the swap fee. Is it correct that Arbitrum would have the default as well at 2 or 0.25?
I think those would be adjustable by each chain. So whatever governs swapper on that chain. So DXdao, mainnet, DXdao, and then the Arbitrum base.
Yeah, exactly. And they start at 0.25 as well. It's the same. So that number, the 0.25, which is the starting point for a new pool, is actually hard coded in the smart contracts, but it is the same 0.25 on each chain so far: DXdao, Ethereum, and Arbitrum.
But Keenan, like we could theoretically lower the pool, the swap fee on Arbitrum, and raise it on mainnet, right? Which may be a way to, direct flows how we would want.
Yeah, absolutely. I was inquiring about the default. Just curious if it was any different, because there's probably room for changing that specifically to each chain, depending on the activity. Obviously, I don't have what those numbers could look like off the top of my head, but I think it's definitely worth looking into.
Another thing I'd be curious about exploring more is the use of time lock campaigns. Like, I'm wondering if maybe some longer term time lock campaigns could be an interesting way to find really like long-term committed liquidity.
Yeah.
The time locks are really interesting, and it's a cool feature of Swapper and can be used, in addition to non-time lock ones, which is really interesting. I think the main thing we've seen when we've experimented with in the past is, obviously this is like normal financial preferences. Like if you're going to lock up for longer, you really need that that return to be that much more attractive than the non-time lock version. And we did that in like some of our earliest do-it-yourself farm testing when we were giving out DXD and WETH as rewards, I think, which is interesting. But the question is what is our long-term target that we would want, like a certain amount targeted? Then can we provide enough incentive to achieve that? So it's related to and ties in with carrot. It's like incentivizing in a different manner, but it's both. We need to come up with the right amount of actual financial incentive to drive that certain behavior, and so that's what does. But that's what better return, better higher APY time lock campaigns can do as well. And theoretically, we could use carrot and that combined, which could get really interesting.
And I think that would demonstrate and exercise the tool suite that the DXdao products have available to them. And yeah, I agree with you, Sky, that there's this opportunity cost that people are not going to want to lock up over longer periods of time without having a higher incentive. Although I do think there's like a counter to that, like an opposite force, which is there's also like a cost in terms of gas fees and attention to be rotating things through shorter period farms. So I do think there is some appeal to being able to make longer commitments, especially depending on who the particular farmer might be.
Completely random thought, and might be a bit of an accounting nightmare, but we could hypothetically split the swapper allocations per pair up 60-40, 70-30, have a larger amount deployed over a longer time period that is locked, and then have our regular biweekly or monthly kind of deployments alongside it.
Yeah, I think Sky was getting at that too, right? Like a layered approach, which I mean, you could have some level of time locked, some kind of more adjustable rewards, and also leverage carrot to have specific goals that you're tying the rewards to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think all this takes some work and consensus. That is kind of more just throwing ideas out more here than anything.
Yeah, just on that point, because I do think it, like, if you're going to lock up for long term, then it needs to be like something that makes sense, right? It's more commitment, right? And so we kind of have to think about what that like upside would be, but it can be much more pointed and specific, rather than this like freewheeling just spray rewards everywhere. But if it's more pointed and specific, that means it's like more effort on like finding something that is unique. That wouldn't get people to make that long-term commitment.
And I think the other swapper feature that pairs nicely with time lock campaigns is the capped campaign. So, and I think that's what we've done in the past is the time lock with the cap. So then you're kind of balancing, there's an opportunity cost to locking it up, but there's also the potential opportunity cost of missing out, right? Like if you're not in that time lock campaign before the cap, you're not going to be able to get in the future, right? So I could imagine maybe like a year or 2 year time lock campaign that's also capped, or maybe the reward is not that much higher than what we're already doing. Maybe it's even lower. But the reason I'm interested in that is I want to lock in that type of reward over a longer period of time.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this as Sky's been talking more about the carrot stuff. And I know this really is like a new model of investment banking, right? You're kind of talking about, hey, here are these like ways you can build different financial products to like sell to investors, distribute to investors. But like those take a lot of customization in like selling almost to the project itself. So I think it's a kind of exciting way of thinking about really like a new way of financing.
I heard you say investment baking. Does that mean I need a vacation?
Yeah, maybe I said that, so I need a vacation, one or the other. But yeah,
I think it makes sense while we're on the topic to just kind of briefly chat the swapper questions and kind of holiday update before rolling into the X.Punks feature here. So I just want to quickly call attention to the holiday season for swapper. We've had single epoch deployments on XDAI, mostly on Arbitrum as well, for the past couple of epochs. But with the holidays, we're going to do a one-time extension that'll last from the 23rd of December until January 20th. Obviously, a little close to comfort to Christmas Eve, but had to work with what we had based on our regular schedule. So we'll have that window. There'll be no active management from the community and nothing immediately to call attention to. Excuse me, provided you staked on the 23rd, which will hopefully be nice and obviously be good for the coordinators here to have some time to think about what they're doing and not have to micromanage these campaigns during the holidays, which is also fantastic. Which kind of leads me into some questions that were left with me regarding swapper. First of which being, when will epochs be extended? Which, of course, this one will be extended twice, and actually in order to make them even longer on Arbitrum, the strong pairs last epoch were extended to 3 epochs. So if you staked in the Arbitrum campaigns on the 9th of December, you actually won't need to manage your Arbitrum liquidity until the 20th of January. So a big window of time there for those in the strong pairs on Arbitrum, Swapper, DXD, wrapped ETH against USDC, for example. But I think there's a larger discussion to be had, and maybe this is something that needs to be discussed with the Swapper community early in Q1 of 2022 about the kind of permanent extension of Epochs. There's a lot of work involved, and I won't do any justification here. But the benefit of doing so has been slowly outpaced by the fact that the rewards are dampening. So we're starting to think it makes sense to start combining epochs, moving the cadence from every 2 weeks deployment to every 4 weeks. If there's any feedback now, of course, feel free to share, but I think there'll be a formal kind of post in the forum and call of attention to the Swapper community early in 2022. I have another question here. Single-sided staking proposal passed. Can I use it soon? I think we have Venki around, hopefully, who would be able to give the best context. Let me see here.
Yeah, he's in the audience. It is being worked on. It's not live. The front end DApp is not supporting it yet. But yeah, Venki would be best to give the update.
Hey, yeah. So we have to update the DApp for launching the campaigns, and then so that the DApp will be able to display all the single token staking, and the team is currently working on that. And I'm guessing that in about, I don't want to promise any timelines, but about 2 to 3 weeks maybe. And yeah, we should be ready with the DApp for testing.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess related to that, I have a question. When can I expect the next Swapper release, and what will be on it?
Okay, so we are working on a couple of things in parallel. So first, let me start with the bridge. We are working on ERC20 bridging between Arbitrum and mainnet. That is almost ready. The testing is in progress, and we have to finalize a release candidate for that. So this could happen potentially early next week. We are also working on XDAI bridging between XDAI and mainnet, and that is in progress, development in progress. So that is what's happening on the bridging. And like I said earlier, we are working adding support for single token staking, and also we are planning to update the UI so that we could split liquidity and farming. Right now they're both in the same page, and we thought that it would be better to separate those. Also, we are working on updating the eco router. So we will have a generic router. Right now, our eco router only supports Uniswap v2 forks, but then the new router, we will be able to add more dexes. So these are the things that we are working on. The next release would probably be including the ERC20 alone, and then it would be followed up with single token staking support.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Venki. I have one more question here, but actually might be a better question for John. Is the airdrop correction and hardware wallet Swapper send happening soon?
Yes, and this is our bad for kind of dropping the ball on this, but we have it ready, and I think we should be able to do the Swapper send to the smart contract addresses in the next week, and then the correction on Arbitrum, I don't know exactly when we'll be able to get that, but soon as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, folks. Just checking for any final questions here. If not, and we can always answer later, let's move on to our special guest this week, the XDAI Punks team. Looking to, I'm not sure exactly, if you could raise your hand, I can bring you up here. Checking for the requests here. Technical difficulties. Stay tuned. I think we're waiting on one come over. That might be what's happening here. We can move on for the time being. Let's chat the agave carrot partnership. Excuse me. We do have John, who just did a podcast related to this, so probably great to have some context from you.
Yes, just had a recording with T. Wells and Monstrosity from the Agave and One Hive communities discussing the agave use of carrot, the partnership with DXdao there. So my mind is full of cool thoughts around this, and happy to answer questions. Keenan, do you want me to kind of summarize, or?
Yeah, I think the full context would be great. I know we've touched on it a bit last week, but it was also before the formal announcement, so there's a bit more context now.
So imagine folks are familiar with Carrot, but in brief, it's Programmable Incentives. It's a new product that's just been launched. It's in alpha, just a couple of campaigns running right now, a couple on Swapper and then one on Agave. And so to address kind of what's going on with Agave, they set up a campaign. So Programmable Incentives, it's all about like setting a goal. The goal here for Agave is to incentivize the use of the Agave lending platform. It's a fork of Aave on the DXdao network, and they're trying to specifically incentivize total value locked. So for people to deposit one of the tokens that are supported on Agave, and I think it's DXdao, USDC, WETH, and Stake that are currently supported and counted in that TVL. And they are currently rewarding people who deposit into Agave with carrot tokens for the month of December, right? So they've locked up their reward collateral into the carrot, minting the carrot tokens, and now they're distributing the carrot tokens. And depending on how well they do against their goal, the people farming those carrot tokens now will, at the end of the campaign, be able to redeem them for the reward. So I'll talk a little more specifically about what the campaign is and what the reward token is and how that works. So the campaign is, like I said, incentivizing TVL, and they are distributing the reward over the month of December. But the target is to measure the total value locked in the last week of December and to take the average of that. So the range that is being rewarded is $3 million to $12 million of TVL. And so that means if during that last week the average TVL is below 3 million, the carrots aren't redeemable for any reward. In Agave, the project gets back all of the reward tokens. And if it's above 3 million, it starts to pay out, with the max full reward being paid out at 12 million, and it being a range in between that. So if it's, for example, like halfway through that range, doing so it's 7.5 million, then half of the reward tokens are paid out. And so right now, so let's talk about how the reward works. Right now, Carrot supports single ERC20 tokens as the reward token. So projects, when they create their campaigns, that's what they're locking up in order to mint the Carrot tokens for that particular campaign. And Agave wanted to actually do dual rewards with Stake and Agave. But since Carrot only currently supports single tokens, the way they're actually doing that is with a pool token. So they're using Symmetric. Symmetric's a balancer fork on the DXdao network. They created a 60-40 pool with Agave and Stake on Symmetric, and they're using that pool token as the reward collateral in Carrot. So if the goals are met to some degree and it pays out, you'll be able to redeem the Carrot tokens earned in this campaign for those Symmetric pool tokens, which contain Stake and Agave. And the other cool thing about this, besides just it being a way of giving two tokens as reward, is that a couple things. One is that it's actually providing liquidity on the stake agave pair in Symmetric, right? So that's beneficial to the agave ecosystem. And in addition to that, the agave project Treasury is actually earning yield on that pool token in the Symmetric system, because Symmetric is paying out incentives in the form of their token, and I think also in stake. So pretty cool layered approach by Agave, and I think a great use of carrot. I'm hoping that the TVL will do well and that the farmers will get rewarded. But if they don't, one of the benefits of carrot is it's not costing the Agave Treasury if they're not meeting their goals. Yeah, that's
Thank you so much
summary.
for the context.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. I have one question here actually with me, and it's, can you guys share any more carrot partnerships at this time?
No, I was asked that on the recording this morning, and yes, we are talking to other teams, but nothing formal to announce at this point.
Excellent. Cool. Any final carrot related questions here? Chat is open. Just trying to hear back from the XDAI punks. So it looks like something might have come up urgent. Not sure if they'll be able to join, but we'll give them a little bit of time here and can maybe openly chat carrot if there's anything to chat about.
I can just talk more while we're waiting to see if there's more questions or not. But when
always taking the opportunity.
Yeah, don't give me any chance here. Yeah, me and Powers, we'll just talk the whole time, right? Like, so gotta be careful. But when you're setting up a carrot campaign, the project kind of picks the condition, right? They're setting up this condition for the conditional reward, which is in the form of a question, and it uses reality.eth as the oracle. So you're setting up that question through reality.eth with Agave here. The question is like, what will the TVL be during the average TVL be during the last week of December in Agave? So the total TVL in Agave. And then you're also specifying like how the reward will pay out. And so they're saying it's a scalar reward between 3 and 12 million. And then it's also up to the project, how do they distribute these rewards? And so Agave is distributing the rewards over the month of December. They started, I think, a little over a week ago, and they're currently being emitted and will be emitted through the full month of December. So kind of up to the project that how they match up the distribution timeline and the measurement timeline for the condition. So it's actually this interesting feature of the Agave campaign is that they're measuring the TVL during the last week, but the rewards are currently emitting. And if you're farming on Agave, the amount of rewards you get is dependent on what the current TVL is, right? So Monstrosity was making the point this morning that those farmers farming now are actually getting, because the TVL is kind of in the lower range of the reward, those farmers are sort of speculating in a way, right? That TVL may go up during the last week, because if it does and they were earning at a lower TVL, they're actually getting kind of a multiplying effect on their APY. So that's also kind of an interesting dynamic here in the carrot campaigns, and specifically with how Agave set up this first campaign. But that's all I got. You're gonna have to give me something else, Keenan. I actually can't talk about
I was about to say. Yeah, so it looks like there might be some sort of issue on the XDAI Punk side. I think something might have come up urgently, unfortunately, so we might be deferring that till next week or potentially after the holiday season. So apologies for that, anyone that might have been looking forward to it. Hopefully we hear back and we'll be able to have them next week.
I'm learning that building anticipation is like a key component for a successful NFT project. You have to build up that anticipation.
Yeah, definitely. One last thing, I suppose a final note. We'll end a little bit early here, missing the XDAI Punks folks. If you haven't seen, we've changed our logos on Discord, Twitter to do a bit of a festive themed DXdao logo with a wreath courtesy of the lovely Boris Block, who I believe is actually here. So thank you for that. I think it looks fantastic. Hopefully, and maybe we'll have some for our products as well, being Swapper Carrot. Potentially something to look forward to as we come near the holidays. Any final thoughts or comments here from anyone on the stage?
No, hope everybody gets to enjoy the holiday season coming up, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Again, hopefully we'll be seeing the XDAI folks on a following call. Sorry about those that were looking forward to that. Of course, happy holidays to everyone here. We'll touch base in the channels within the next week regarding the 23rd call. Should be having a community call as normal. Will depend on who's around and if we have contributors available, of course. And yeah, thank you, everyone, for attending, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.